We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start out with the regular opening Indigenous land acknowledgement, national anthem, and opening remarks. So please stand. Thank you.
We begin this meeting by acknowledging that Quinte West is on Indigenous land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, there have been Indigenous peoples who have been the stewards of this place. In particular, we acknowledge the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte First Nation. This territory is covered by numerous treaties. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contribution of the Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, and our province and country as a whole. This acknowledgement serves as recognition of the contributions and historical significance of Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island and demonstrates our collective commitment to meet the promises and address the challenges of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission within our community.
Okay, we got a few, slides from Director Denowden, and we'll get through, beginning to go through the process of budget for 2024. Thanks very much, Councillor Deputy Mayor McHugh, for handling the last meeting, and appreciate your work. And maybe you won't have time to go to Cuba because we'll have more work for you.
I was paid a quarter for my services. Thank you.
That definitely wasn't from me. Thank you. Appreciate it. I don't pay, but I recognize. Thank you. All right, Caleb, you're on. Thank you very much. I guess I need any disclosures. I got to go through that. Any disclosures? Seeing none, declare that closed. Approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Boyce, Councillor Sharp. Thank you. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Thank you. Okay, very much. And now we're on to delegations. And Caleb, you're on first, second, and third with Matt. Thank you.
That's
all
good.
bases covered, right?
That's right. So welcome, Council, to first budget meeting of 2024. Today's meeting is to provide the information that will better equip Council to make decisions at the December meeting and give Council an opportunity to request any specific information that staff can provide before those meetings. One of the main factors in making decisions on the budget is knowing the long-term impact, and that is why we decided to have the asset management plan as well as information on the long-term capital plans discussed prior to budget, so Council has an idea of how these decisions in 24 will fit into the overall financial plan and position of the municipality, not only for the rest of the Council's term, but for the 10-year horizon. Some of the questions that will be asked is more, what is the growth strategy of Quinte West? Do we invest in projects that are required for new housing and industrial developments? If it comes at an annual cost to existing residents via water bills or property taxes? Do we rehab our existing $2.6 billion of infrastructure at an equal rate to its deterioration? What level of service do we expect our roads and assets to be in 4 years? Better, worse, same? Do we put money into climate change initiatives, social services, healthcare, housing affordability? Or is this an opportunity for a call to help from the province and other levels of government? What extent do we increase our support to community partners, hospitals, recreation centers, things for our growing needs as well? So the agenda today, as I mentioned, I'll give a bit of an overview of the 2024 budget, what we can expect to affect the 24 budget in December. Riley Walters is here to update us on the asset management plan, and then Matt Hodge, our manager of finance, will take us through the long-term capital plans for both the city and the water and sewer budgets. These are the items I will address here as part of the overview. So the timeline, we came to council in October, outlined the timeline. This is some of the earlier dates we've done in the past in order to get our budget approved as early as possible for 2024, get ahead of procurement and everything that comes along with initiating our 2024 objectives. December 6th, 7th will be the meeting following this one, where we actually have the first draft budget, both operating and capital, for council to review. It's a 2-day meeting that will include external agencies and community organizations, and then we'll follow up after that 2-day meeting with a proposed budget and tax levy on January 17th. As council is aware, there's a budget survey. This first year we've polled the public with, I think it was just under 10 questions. We've left this poll and survey open until November 10th, that's this Friday. So if you have a chance, please encourage others to take the survey, fill in the survey, and we'll come back with results in December. We also have a survey, of course, for councillors, so if you haven't yet, please take an opportunity to fill in that survey. As you can see, inflation, this is one of the economic indicators that we looked at for this year. Inflation first exceeded the Bank of Canada's 2% target in early 2021. 2022 hit a 4-decade high, and in 2023, we are not yet back to the Bank of Canada's 2% target. So over 3 years of exceeding that. The last 3 years, the combined total tax levy increase has been 8.76% to the average tax bill in Quinte West. Compare that with 14.1% inflation rate over the same period. And the city has a 5% gap in purchasing power than when we were in 2020. Non-residential CPI, building construction price index. This is more indicative of our cost to build roads and a lot of our construction projects. It has been in the double digits for the last 2 years, and in the second quarter of 2023, it is coming back down, but it's still at 7%. So what we could do in, historically in 2020 and before, with a 3% increase in our capital levy is in 2019, 2020, is now equivalent to 10-20% more, just because of inflation. To put this in perspective, a dedicated 2% capital levy, which this council implemented last year, is equivalent to a 6% increase in non-res building construction price increase. So basically a 2% capital levy would have been great in that year 2020, you can see. It would have been above the inflation, but in the last 2 to 3 years, even a 2% capital levy leaves us short of inflation on the construction price index. To make matters worse, the city is not seeing inflationary increases in additional provincial or federal revenues by way of gas tax, OSIF, CCBF. The revenues have stayed relatively flat. In fact, OSIF has actually gone down from where we were at, and the PILT, as we all know, was reduced by $1 million as well. So this is kind of a perfect storm of coupled with inflation and little change in additional revenue from other levels of government. So looking now at some of the other factors, the external agencies and how that might affect our 2024 budget. Quinte West transfers approximately $30 million, so that's about a third of our general tax levy, to external partners. As you can see, preliminary budgets are working through these external partners are working through their budgets, with some already set. Preliminary budgets have indicated most partners will have a draft budget that exceeds, for overall, our external agencies will exceed that of the 2023 requests and surpass inflation indices. These partners have been invited to December 7th council meeting to discuss their budget requests for council. Three of them will be here, including the Library Board, Quinte Waste, and Quinte Transit from that list. In terms of good news, one of the larger external partners, OPP, has provided their budget already, and that's been within 1% of their 23 budgets. Finally, the largest of our external partners, Hastings County, they will begin deliberations in their budget in the next few months, a little bit later on from our budget. This is a $12 million budget and accounts for about 15% of our levy. So due to timing, staff will plan to present the tax levy increase for 24 budget independent of the Hastings County budget, just so we can kind of move on with our budget.
Just before you go any further, could you just repeat exactly what you said the OPP increase is?
That's right, that was 1%.
That's what I thought you said. 1%. And what was it last year?
It was about 1% as well.
Thank you.
No, I think Quinte West has been very fortunate with the OPP in the last couple of years, for sure. So after inflation, external agencies, another factor that will affect our 24 budget deliberations is these external community groups. They obviously provide various services to the public and can often have significant benefits to help us achieve our strategic priorities. However, additional commitments to these groups do require increase in revenues. The following are a list of groups that have been approached City over the last 12 months about additional funding, and some you may recognize from the previous budget, which were deferred to this budget. Overall, the combined ask of these groups is approaching $1 million. And so we've invited all 10 of these to come to the December 7th meeting to give a bit of an overview of what they're asking for and an opportunity for council to think about how these could be funded. I'm sorry. One of the common directives from council is to achieve the strategic priorities that were set in the 2020 strategic plan. The first list there of those 5 items are the strategic priorities that were set by council. In addressing some of these, council has implemented annual special levies. As you can see in the list below, the special levies, housing and industrial land were both in the 2023 operating budget. So these special levies went to reserves, dedicated reserves. The housing strategy has been also followed by a council-approved housing action plan, which also could have significant financial implications during our budget deliberations, especially with our HAF application and some of the items mentioned in the housing action plan. The industrial land reserve is also in need of contributions above the $150,000 annually if we want to continue on the trend of investing in industrial land. The climate change reserve has a balance of $350,000 that was put away by previous councils, and the annual contribution was eliminated in 2023's budget. The infrastructure deficit continues to be a challenge facing long-term capital plan, and currently the asset management plan and long-term financial plans you'll see tonight are all assuming that capital levy 2%, which was implemented last year, would continue. And finally, healthcare continues to be a focus as we see, requirements for doctor recruitment, hospital contributions locally, Kingston Hospital, and medical offices. So these are other healthcare contributions that we've seen in the 23 and we'll also see in the 24 budget. And so that's kind of our outlook for 2024 budget. I'll pass it on to Riley to give you a bit of an overview of how asset management plans are coming along.
All right, hello everyone. I'll start with a quick overview of the asset management regulation. In 2022, we passed an asset management plan for our core assets, which are roads, bridges, culverts, water, wastewater, and stormwater assets. The plan had to cover what we owned and how much it would cost to maintain our current service levels. By July 1st, 2024, we need to have an asset management plan for all non-core assets, which includes trails, playgrounds, facilities, and fleet. In the following slides, we'll give you a brief overview of where we are. By July 1st, 2025, we will need to update our plans from current service levels to proposed service levels and close any infrastructure deficit. The first asset group is outdoor parks and recreation. which includes trails, playgrounds, and sports fields, and has a total replacement value of $38.6 million. We use the same tool we use to assess our roads on our asphalt trails, but the rest of the assets are currently using their age versus expected lifespan to come up with their condition. Non-core assets are generally harder to plan for as there is not as much data on them, and so many plans will use age-based conditions to start like we have here. We can then use synergistic data like the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and new work order data to update the plan as opposed to spending additional money on assessments. Over the next 10 years, we should be spending about $2.8 million per year to maintain our current service levels. That's $129,000 on playgrounds, $306,000 on sports fields, $270,000 on trails rehabilitation, and $2.1 million on new trails. The two big growth projects you see are in blue and are those new trails. The one in 2024 connects Bain Park to Centennial Park, and in 2032 is the paving of the trail from Dufferin Avenue to Young's Cove, as recommended in the Active Transportation Master Plan. The next asset class is facilities, and the city has 92 facilities throughout the city worth about $292.5 million. We are currently in the process of getting facility assessments to get better updated costs and conditions. Currently the costs are inflated installation costs and conditions are just age-based. We thought getting facility assessments was worth it, as facilities are a significant portion of capital spend for the city. There are synergies with other departments like insurance, accounting, and of course the department who controls the facility, as well as the fact that each facility is very unique with different materials, sizes, etc. The ideal spend for facilities is $18.9 million per year. Of that, about $14.3 million is related to water and wastewater growth projects from the Water Wastewater Master Plan, which include the expansion of the Trenton Wastewater Treatment Plant and the installation of a new elevated water storage tank in Trenton. The next asset class is fleet, and the city has 302 vehicles and equipment worth about $52 million. Overall, about 58% of fleet are in fair condition or worse, with public works light vehicles being in the worst shape and corporate vehicles being in the best. Conditions are based off of a combination of age and the mileage of the vehicle, and the costs are either from recent tenders, straight from vendors, or given from staff. Our ideal spend for fleet is $4.1 million per year, with $100,000 being for growth and the remaining $4 million for rehabilitation, which is significantly higher than the $2.2 million the city has historically spent on fleet. And next I'll take you through an update of our core assets, showing any changes from the plan we passed in 2022. While the cost of roads have risen significantly, the updated ideal spend on roads has actually gone down. Analysis was done on the degradation of roads over time, and lifespans for roads were increased versus our previous assumption. We also started significantly increasing the crack sealing program, which helps ensure the city gets the most life out of its roads. The ideal bridge spend has gone up due to 2 full replacements and expansions of the Wooler Road Bridge and DJ McDonald Bridge. We are also in the middle of the biannual Bridge and Culvert Needs Study, so expect to see updated numbers when the full plan comes back in June. Finally, we have data on all city parking lots. We were able to build an inventory, get estimated costs from historical projects, and use the same camera system we use for roads to get conditions. Overall, we should be spending about $24.6 million per year on transportation assets. Next, an update on underground core infrastructure. Water pipes have a slightly higher ideal spend compared to the prior plan, driven up by inflation. Wastewater pipes also have an increased ideal spend, driven by inflation and new growth projects from the Water Wastewater Master Plan. Stormwater pipes have actually decreased due to updated inventory data. I added the map to the slide for context. Over the next 30 years, we should replace every pipe you see highlighted on the map. But at the current pace we are doing full polygon replacements, we will only do about 12 kilometers or 20% of them. This means that 30 years from now, about 20% of the water pipes in Quinte West will be past their useful life. The oldest pipe in our system is from 1941, with a significant portion of the water network being cast iron or asbestos cement pipe installed in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And finally, here are some quality improvements that are being done for asset management. The first one is that last year we got traffic volumes for the entire road network and some detailed data on specific sections showing how much of the traffic was local traffic versus people using it as a through road to another municipality. Next year we hope to have updated data that gives us things like the average speed of traffic and the number of pedestrians or bikers on the road. Another thing is that we continued to get yearly condition assessments on our roads and have been able to use the same software for parking lots and paved trails. We also integrated our vehicle tracking geotab system into asset management, and that helped drive our fleet decisions. And then finally, we are planning to undertake facility assessments to get up-to-date, accurate data on our facilities. Thank you for listening. I can answer any questions or pass it on to Matt.
We'll finish the presentations anymore, and then we'll take questions, okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks, Riley. Hi, Council. I will go through the city and water and wastewater long-term capital plans. The asset management plan is a great tool for capital budgeting. It ranks and scores within each category, but not across all categories. For example, roads versus facilities. For 2024 budget, we have started using a capital budget prioritization tool, scoring tool. This is an improvement on last year's needs versus wants scoring. In essence, it allows ranking and scoring across all categories so we can compare roads to facilities. There's not enough yearly budget dollars available to complete all the asset management projects each year. So this tool is completed by each department and allows the ranking of every city project. It allows us to further refine the asset management list for budget constraints. This table shows some of the criteria used to create the universal scoring tool. We used best practices and metrics comparable that other municipalities have used, and every metric showing is assigned to each project. Here's some of the remaining scoring metrics. One option per metric is given a weighted average. The weighted average for each metric is added together for a final project score. And then the higher the number, the more important the project. So this is an example project for the scoring results. So the scores will be for all projects that help adjust the project capital project listing to meet budget requirements, but we can keep in mind that this scoring metric is subjective, and we still have the ability to reprioritize and adjust as necessary. So the city long-term capital plan. So over the past few years, we've been able to accomplish the King Street reconstruction, Centennial Park upgrades, boat launch, the industrial park extension on North Huff, as well as the Carrying Place Industrial Park. So this is showing just the cities. So for the city's capital plan, this chart shows the difference between our ideal or asset management required spend of 36 million versus our projected 10-year spend of 30 million versus our average spend over the last 4 years of 19 million. With the annual 2% capital levy, we were able to increase our spend and work at closing the infrastructure gap. The asset management plan will continue to grow as we get better data specifically for the parks master plan and the facilities assessments. However, even with our 2% annual capital levy increase each year, we are still playing catch up with inflation costs. For example, in the past 4 years, we are on average paving 11 kilometers of road. For the next 4 years, we'll be paving 6 kilometers of roads, and looking 10 years out is when we catch up and we're back to 11 kilometers of road. So this is a snapshot of the city's long-term capital funding. These amounts continue to be updated as we work through the details of the capital budget for the next budget meeting on December 6th. The blue capital levy is based on the 2% increase, along with using the asset management plan and the budget scoring tool. The orange and yellow are OCF and gas tax, which have been budgeted just to remain flat, as it's external funding from federal and provincial that could change up or down. Debt, showing in black, has been assigned to Wooler Bridge, the Marina Breakwall, new industrial park, and the later years for the DJ McDonald Bridge. Other reserves include specific amounts set aside for things like fleet and special projects. The use of the development charges collected for the use on growth projects show in green. Grants are in purple. Those are amounts that we will receive external funding for projects such as the Centennial to Bain Trail in 24. So this slide is a projection of only the city's capital reserve outlook based on maintaining the 2% levy increase each year for the next 10 years. So this doesn't include the water wastewater specific reserves or reserve funds, which are different. We have a reserve policy from 2022 that set our target balance at annual depreciation, which our average reserve balance is not reaching over the next 10 years. So as you can see, the capital reserve balance does start increasing in 2026. However, this is mainly due to there's not enough reserve funds in there to pay for the Marina Breakwall, so debt is being used. As we've seen in the previous slide, the debt and reserves tend to go up together as there are more required projects and funds available, leaving a projected balance of about 12 million by the end of this council's term. Reserves are being drawn down at the end of the 10-year term for the trail expansion that was mentioned from the active transportation master plan. Development charges. So this is development charges premises that growth pays for growth. The city is currently involved in a development charge update. The majority of the 180 million in growth projects for the city are carried forward from the previous study with updated costs. Some of the large projects include County Road 40 Wooler Bridge widening, the DJ McDonald widening to 4 lanes, increasing Sydney Street from 2 to 4, along with the underpass. And of these projects, there's still a portion that is related to benefit to existing that will need to be paid for by other revenue sources other than DC. Significant project costs increases are from inflation and better asset management costing, and they have an effect on the required DC charge to be able to implement these growth projects. These cost changes result in a potential need for a large increase to the DC charge, or a combination of the following: increase the DC charge, increase the property tax rate, increase debt, or do less growth projects. Even with the DC charges increased to the required amount, growth still does not pay for all of the growth with the Bill 23. There's the mandatory 5-year phase-in. So for the first year, it's only 80%. The rough estimate that we have for the effects of Bill 23 for the city would require about 320,000 yearly of tax revenue that would need to be transferred to the DC reserve, which would be reflected in the operating budget and funded from property tax. So for context, a 1% tax rate increase is about $700,000 for the city. This chart ties into the previous slides on the capital projects and reserves. So if there's not enough reserves for a required project, then debt and debt payments will increase. Our long-term plan is to keep debt at the current levels. There is an annual repayment limit set by the provincial government on how much a municipality can borrow, which is 25% of revenues. So the city is about at about 18 million based on 73 million in tax revenues. The city will get up to about 12% of net revenues committed to debt payments. So this debt to reserve chart is for city and water combined. The debt to reserve ratio is a snapshot measure of a municipality's financial situation. The ratio calculations come from a BMA consultant study, which is based on FIR data. As we can see, compared to our local peers, the city of Quinte West has more debt and less available reserves. And a ratio change of 1 versus 2 has a significant difference, and we are projected to be at 4.6 if we include only our uncommitted reserves. We have a portion of our current reserves allocated to 2023 and prior capital projects that haven't been completed yet. I can stop for questions now, or if you want to just wait until the end.
I guess I'm going to ask CEO Clazy, any updates on sources of revenue at this point for the city?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we did have a conversation with Minister Smith yesterday, who seemed to indicate there might be some water and wastewater funding available in the near future, but we don't have any specific details on that yet, but we are taking a look to see what we can find. We have not received the final the payment yet. I know staff have been working with the ministry staff to get that finalized, but we have not received a payment yet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Matt, I think it's great you're working on a system to prioritize what needs to be done, and that's great. One thing that concerned me was Mr. Riley said the water pipes, there's going to be a real deficit in the future. When we did the water line across the river, there was a sleeve put in. Is there a potential of maybe doing that to some of these to extend the life of the water pipes for our city?
Director Angelo, for an answer on that one?
Through your worship, yes, that is certainly one strategy, is relining existing water mains versus replacing them or refurbishing them. But because of the age sometimes of some of these pipes, His worship, remember even the pipe in Badawa where we had an 8-inch pipe, and really it was so badly corroded, the size of your thumb actually was the inside actually supplying water. So that can't be refurbished, it needs to be replaced. But that's certainly an option we're looking at, is relining as well.
That's great, thank you.
I remember that. Sorry, thank you. Do we no longer have that pipe?
I certainly do, your worship, yeah.
Okay, well, that's fine, yes. Okay, well, that's just, all we need to do is see it. We'll know exactly what we're faced with. But Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question with regard to the development charges study, just a bit of a status report on when we anticipate having that study completed or coming before council.
Yeah, Councilor Sharp. We are working with them. We have another meeting tomorrow, but we're looking at hopefully beginning of the year to have something, and before then have another update for council on the status of it as as a staff report.
May I ask one more? Okay. With regard to the existing debt situation, and I know we're under the provincial, I guess, standard, we're able to, you know, have more debt. We don't want to have more debt. But just a question, when you come forward, or maybe this is more for Mr. Denouden, and we look at potentially having more debt on some of these projects, and then there's the impact on the operating, will that be very clear when we report back what that impact is going to be on the budget with the individual projects?
We have each individual project assigned on how we're gonna fund it. So this slide here, those numbers are derived from which projects are in our capital plan. So if we move projects in or out, it adjusts how much.
It'll adjust that one?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And if I could, on this, the other chart, why was Ottawa used as an example? We had Belleville, Brighton, or Belleville, and then Ottawa. Just trying to understand why that would be.
Yes, Councillor, but just to show there are some that are up that high. We're not.
Oh,
we're
I
not
see.
alone in
The 4.6, that we're not
Yes,
alone?
yes.
Thank you.
There's one more reason. I think Ottawa fits because of the PILT money. Correct? Do you have any of those? We can get those figures and show you, but I know we lost money in terms of PILT, but Ottawa lost big time compared to us. So anyways, that's
Mr.
okay.
Mayor,
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
in regards to what I heard on the news reported, the lost PILT money to the city of Ottawa, then this was last year that I heard it on the news, was in the range of $20 million. 20.
I can't argue because I don't remember, but
That's what I heard on the news last year.
considerable, but anyway.
Eat,
The province made it up, that's, yeah,
well, for us.
they made it up for them too, yes.
Am I able to ask a question too, or are you going to somebody else?
I'm sorry?
Am I able to ask a question of
Yes,
staff?
go ahead.
I like to think that I'm paying attention most of the time, but this is the first I've heard where we are actually going to have to transfer $320,000 of our tax revenue to development charges. Can somebody explain that? Am I not, or did I not hear correctly?
Through Mayor, yes, Councillor Quinte. This is similar to the industrial exemption. So if it's something that is in the DC calculation, but we are exempt and not collecting on, then we have to provide those funds to make the development charge fund whole. So the mandatory phase-in, the first year is 80% reduction in the DC that we're allowed to charge. So we have to put city funds in to make up the shortfall.
So our taxpayers, and where's this coming from? This bill, so obviously the province of Ontario is telling us we have to do this.
Correct.
So all of our taxpayers are now putting in $320,000, which is roughly 0.5% of the tax collected back into development charges. And how long do we have to do that for?
The phase-in, right now, that's the rules for development charge is the 5-year phase-in to get up to 100%. So every time we reopen the Development Charge Act and change the development charge, we start the phase-in again.
So we do this for 5 years and then we're going to be given a new number later on, or we get to stop altogether? Or we never know?
If we update our development charges, then we start the phase-in over.
So it's what you call a form of downloading?
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Thank you.
So, because there's a whole bunch of other stuff that are a form of downloading going on that it's so spread out that nobody can keep track of it.
Well, we're doing our best. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to the debt level, I'm very concerned the more debt we take on, the more we handcuff ourselves for the future, having to make the principal payments and the interest payments. And we need to keep the debt ratio as low as possible. I know it might be more taxes, but we've got to be very careful about increasing our debt levels.
None of us disagree. We all agree. Councilor McHugh.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, maybe Director Angela can answer this for me. I remember 7, 8 years ago sitting here, and we had a gentleman come, a consultant. He was saying to keep your roads the way they are today, you need to spend about $30-some million. That's without any improvements, and we were spending in the neighborhood of $20-some million. Where do we stand exactly day in dollars? What are we spending and what should we be spending? I'd like the taxpayers to know that, because my biggest complaint seems to be all the time, or the complaint that costs the most money, is people calling in saying, fix my road, please.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Through your worship to Councilor McHugh, I think if Mr. Hodge refers back to one of his slides about the city long-term capital plan, it really references like roads. What we should be spending is about $18 million a year, and on average, we're spending half that, the $9 million. So we're definitely not putting enough money into resurfacing, rehabilitation, reconstruction that we should be to maintain our core assets.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Councilor Boyce.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think we all agree about the debts, and we try to keep them low. But when we look at deteriorating roads and such, and we know that the roads, once they hit a point, then exponentially they raise up, to repair them. So what costs less? Borrowing some money to repair a road before it completely deteriorates and then costs, a higher amount, or borrowing at a fixed rate, having that road fixed so that we don't get to that point where it costs so much that we have to end up replacing it. That's something that I think we need to think about. But is there, for example, maybe I'll go to Director Angelo. When a road becomes to the point where we've got to deteriorate it, isn't it cheaper to borrow the money and have it fixed rather than let it deteriorate?
I'll let Director Angelo go ahead, please.
Through your worship, that's a really good question, because that's certainly the challenge we all have. We have this pot of money given to the city, allocated by council to, let's say, repair or resurface roadways. We know that's not enough to do everything. We have a challenge. Do we look at converting some roads back to gravel and easy to maintain? But is that the right solution to do? So it's certainly a challenge in terms of affordability. What is the best solution? Is it taking on debt to resurface those roads? Is it like in terms of a long-term debenture? Or is it picking off each one each year as much as we can prioritize based on what taxpayers can afford? That's the challenge that we all face. And we're not unique. Every municipality is in that boat as well.
Thank you. Councilor Card?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think it's a very important point between Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Boyce's points with the debt. Ultimately, it appears we're at about half of our ultimate borrowing limit, or will be within a couple of years here. And without the DC charge study, by 2031, we will have reached it. I think it was around there. I think ultimately what we have to think about, it might be cheaper to borrow at the higher interest rates to fix up the roads, but we can only do that for a few more years, basically, is what this long-term capital plan is showing us. We only have a few more years of that ability, so eventually we're going to run out of money that we can borrow according to the province when you factor in all the water, wastewater. So I think ultimately a question has to ask, what do the taxpayers want to fund? And by just extending down the road another decade, we're just going to spend a lot of interest money and still have to come to the hard decisions of, okay, we have to pay for these things or we have to let them go to gravel. And so I
appreciate the idea of the more borrowing, and then we even have less flexibility for, if the arena, we need a new arena or whatever the Parks and Rec master plan unveils to us, or there's other emergency failures of infrastructure like the water main break. We have no, we're drawing down reserves, and then if the debt gets maxed out, and it's there's something I think fundamentally unfair about leaving the next generation too with a situation if we reach that 2031 debt limit where a quarter, 25 cents of every dollar in property taxes raised would be going to pay for projects that were done before, just servicing those previous projects, a quarter of the property taxes. That's a very scary outlook to me that really handcuffs, the next generation. So, but it's an important conversation to have, because we really do have to come to the bottom of it, whether it is funding these things or stopping these growth projects and letting some of the roads go to gravel and just figuring out where those levels are, I think.
Yeah. And Your Worship, I'm certainly not saying we just borrow until we're maxed out. I don't think anybody with any financial sense would say that. I'm just simply saying we've got to look at it, and in terms of all the aspects, we've got to make sure that we don't simply consider debt as a taboo word, that sometimes it's necessary. We all can't go out and buy homes and pay cash for them, and sometimes debt's necessary. But you're right, we have to be cognizant about the amount of debt and leaving it to our next generations.
Okay, Councillor Stendhal or Councillor Reid or Councillor Freeman, any questions or comments? I don't want to ignore you. Thank you.
Yes, just a couple comments in with regard to the debt, Your Worship. It's just I guess my feeling is that debt needs to only be levied if there is some kind of way that we can repay it. So if there's user fees or if there's money coming in from some other source that's going to help repay the debt. But if we keep putting this out, if we just keep borrowing debt in order to pay for projects, it's all going to come back on the taxes at the end of the day. So I think we need to make sure that we've got other alternative measures to pay for any new debt going forward rather than putting it on the taxes. Otherwise, we might as well just put on the taxes today rather than borrowing it, because it's cheaper in the long run rather than paying the interest.
Thank you. Councillor Reid or Councillor Freeman, any comments or questions? Councillor.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Allier.
Yes, Matt, in the city's long-term capital funding sources, the OSIP one, we lost $1 million last year, I understand. And I see you've got it forecasted it's going to last for about the next 9 or 10 years at $5 million, and we'll hope the province doesn't change that. One part of that I'm not a fan of is the subsidization of water and sewer rates out of that fund. Do you see that increasing, decreasing, or how do you see that managed? Because I still do not support that, and because it's supposed to be a user-pay system, and we are a city of certainly partial service, full service, and no service, and there's more no service than servicing. And I think I always is of the mindset that the OSIF should be used for what it was meant for, infrastructure. And but I just wondered if you would comment on that. Do you see any more funding run in that direction for that support of that program? Or do you see that being status quo for the period of when that's enforced? Because I did look on the province's website, and it's only a 10-year grant plan, and I know they come and they change, and years of setting here, some of these sources don't always last forever. So, and then down the road, you got to look where you're going to get the money from to keep doing what you were doing. So that's maybe a loaded question for you. I'm not sure, but anyway, that's my concerns.
Yep. Through your mayor to Councillor Alia. The OSAF, the calculation changed a few years ago, and now it is based on asset management numbers. So the funds that we receive that are split between all municipalities are based on all municipalities' asset management plans that are submitted, so that funding allocation, it's hard to predict. That's why we just left it as the $5 million, just keep it. It could go up, could go down. we'll just keep it level throughout our planning. So we don't really have any direction on if it could go up, if it could go down. Asset management plans are changing for all municipalities. Everybody's getting more data and better data, so it's a very hard one to predict, which does make long-term capital planning hard to get very accurate, since it is a large number that we depend on.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Can I ask,
Councillor Quincy?
just want to ask a follow-up question to your statement there. So the asset management plan that we're putting together and submitting to the province of Ontario, they're going to use that information for our OSIF funding, and are they going to use that information for other funding, or do we know?
Through your
I'm
mayor.
sure that's exactly what they're going to do, because you know, we're concerned with the community investment funds and
Yes.
where they're at and where they should be. Anyone else? Any other comments?
So is that what's
Through your mayor,
happening?
yes, that is correct. The new calculation, the reason why our OSIF decreased is the new basis of the OCF allocation between all
Correct.
municipalities is now based on.
Yeah, but now
the
we're
asset
going to
management.
complete our asset management plan, submit that to the province of Ontario.
Yes.
And are they going to be looking at that like within weeks of getting it and deciding what our funding is going to be, or do they get the plan and then they use that plan from 2024 to tell us what we're going to be doing in 2028, where we don't have a clue?
They have yearly deadlines for us to submit the form to fill in that they use to do the calculations.
So that just makes it challenging for everybody. Thanks.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Any questions? Anybody? None at all? Well, thank you very much. Keep going.
I got more, yep.
Okay.
So now we'll start into the water and wastewater. So for water and wastewater, over the past few years, we've been able to accomplish the Frankfurt plant expansion and loop, the West End water main trunk, the Stonecrest plant upgrades. And for this chart for water and sewer, it shows the difference between our ideal spend, our asset management of 22 million versus our projected 10-year of 25 versus our average for the past 4 years of 14 million. For the forecast, we assumed a continued 3% per year water and wastewater rate increase. The asset management plan will continue to grow once we get the facilities assessments done. So there are some significant growth projects scheduled in the next 10 years, which will require a large amount of our DC debt. So the next slide will show. So this is a snapshot of water and wastewater's long-term capital funding. These amounts continue to be updated as we work through the detailed capital budget for the next meeting. The blue base rate is from our water rate and selecting the projects with asset management and the scoring tool. The orange is the OCF, which we have, and will, same as city, will remain flat because we can't predict if it's going to go up or down very well. The DC debt is for growth projects that are eligible to use DC reserve funds. We do not have enough DC reserve funds to cover the costs, so debt will be taken out for these projects, and DC reserve funds will be used to make the debt payments. The main growth projects that are using the DC debt are the FBI sewer trunk for the industrial park and the West End. There's a water storage tank in Trenton. There's a wastewater treatment plant capacity increases in the later years. In the later years is the Frankfurt wastewater plant capacity as well. Red is currently unfunded water projects, and that's due to insufficient water reserve balances, as the next slide will show. So these charts show the projection of the water and wastewater reserve outlook based on maintaining the 3% rate increase every year for the next 10 years. We have the same reserve policy that sets our target at annual depreciation. As we can see, the water capital reserve balance goes to zero in 2027. So the yearly base capital amounts collected from the water bills is not enough to cover the capital costs any longer. So over the last few years, projects such as the West End water main, the water meter changeout, road constructions, as well as the 2023 emergency water main bridge crossing have drawn down the water reserve. The wastewater capital reserve continues to grow as most of the upcoming wastewater projects are growth related. The yearly base amount collected from the bills is able to grow the reserve balance until there's a potential large plant refurbishment in 10 years. We'll get better information once we have the facilities assessments. Projects that require both water and sewer in future years are on hold as there's not sufficient water reserves, which is why the wastewater reserves increase as well.
Am I able to ask a question here, Mr. Mayor? Thanks.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
In regards to water and our reserves, how did our exciting water break in the river affect our ability with our reserves going forward?
Through your Mayor, Council, we use the water reserves to cover the 1.2 million for that emergency repair.
I know. I just wanted you to say it out loud so everybody could hear. So how has that affected our ability going forward? Is that why we see, I'm sorry, I can't read your chart as to what year where, like, it drops off out of the blue?
For water, it's 2027, it reaches zero.
Which is not very far away.
Correct.
That's like right around the corner when we come to doing these budget stuff. Because we handle budgets, I know we talk about it for a few weeks, but we make a decision and then that's it for the year. In 2027, we'll be here before we know it. So is there a solution to that?
The solution is during the December 6th detailed meeting, we can discuss what our options are. Water rates can be opened up and a water rate analysis can be done and we can adjust the water rates.
Or can we also just assign a specific levy to long-term water projects, capital water projects? Could we do it that way too? So everybody can see, oh, this is my water rate. Oh, this is to help pay for that lost revenue or lost money that we had in our reserve and now we got to make it up.
Yeah.
And you can do that over a few years' time.
We would have to look into all the options that are available to us, but yeah.
Thank you. Oh, Councilor Neal, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Didn't see your hand
No,
there.
no problem. The water rates, how many years in advance are they set?
I believe they're expiring in 26 or 27 as of right now. We did 10-year,
So,
but we can open them up.
yeah, because to me, the solution is if the reserves are going down that much, the best choice would be to raise the water rates. But we get lots of complaints the water rates are really high now, but we can't have our reserves go down where we can't fund another disaster too.
Correct.
Let's hope the province recognizes that too when we send in all our asset management information, that we're all in the same boat, you know, water and wastewater. We can't grow without them. We can't grow without them and we can't afford to grow. We have to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So yes, thank you.
So this slide is on the development charges for water and wastewater with the same idea that growth pays for growth. The main reason the city opened up the DC study early was the changes in the water and wastewater growth projects from the water and wastewater master plan. So there's new sewer mains and plant expansion requirements are the reason that there's now 302 million in growth projects for water and wastewater. The water and wastewater projects are often linked together. For example, we have development planned on the west end. So we have a $30 million FBI trunk line that is required to connect to the west end. Once that line is there, then we have a $65 million treatment plant expansion required to handle the increased flow. So one without the other does not open up the required growth that the city is committed to. The master plan has new growth projects as well as required cost increase for inflation and better project details. So these cost changes result in a potential need for a large increase to the development charges. Or any of the following: we can increase DC charges, increase the water sewer rates, increase debt, or do less growth projects. But in order to complete all of these growth projects, a large increase in development charges would be needed. So if we're not willing to have higher DCs, then we can't afford to do all of these growth projects. And same as the city, even with DC charges increased to the required amount, growth does not pay for all of growth with the mandatory 5-year phase-in. So the rough estimate for water and sewer from Bill 23 would be $350,000 yearly of water and wastewater rate revenue to be transferred to the DC reserve. Water and wastewater is different, however, from the city, as there's a potential different option of using connection charges instead of development charges to collect the growth portion of future projects. Connection charges use Municipal Act and would not require all the same restrictions that DCs have. So this chart ties into the previous slides on capital projects and reserves. If there's not enough reserves for a required project, debt and debt payments will increase. The long-term plan is to keep water and sewer rate paid debt at the current level, the dark blue, and only increase debt for growth projects using DC funds to make the payments. That's the light blue. Same, there's the annual repayment limit is set by the province at 25% of revenue, which is currently about $5.5 million based on our $23 million in revenue. With the planned $150 million in new debt for growth over the next 10 years, we will surpass the water and wastewater debt limit, but not the overall city and water and wastewater combined limit. The overall combined limit for city and water is 24 million, so currently we're under, and after the next 10 years, we will be getting close at 23, but we'll remain under. So this is our next steps. So next steps, we're presenting the operating capital budgets on December 6th, complete the development charge bylaw in 2024, as well as completing a water and wastewater rate bylaw in 24. That's it from my slides. I'll give it back to Caleb unless there's any questions for these.
I Mr. Mayor.
Two, who's first? Councilor O'Neill.
It's my understanding you're saying the development charges aren't paying for the full cost of growth. With the new development charge study, if they, I think our development charge is about half of what Belleville's are, but if the new study says they should be $20,000 for water and sewer share, we can't say it'd be less than that. Whatever the development charge study says is what we're required to do. Is that correct?
Through your Mayor, Councilor.
That's council's decision. They'll give us a figure, but it's still our decision as to where we go. Okay.
Okay.
Councilor Card.
Thank you, Your Worship. Matt, could you talk a little bit about what, and this is kind of what scares me the most, is kind of the long-term debt driver, the water and wastewater growth projects. What sort of choices do we really have in terms of not doing growth projects? Is that going to, I know that there's some legislation that pertains to it dictating what we have to do, and then ultimately would that come down to having new subdivisions and new housing units just be declined in areas like the West End where the infrastructure will just be maxed out? And I always think about growth projects as, choose to or not to based on kind of our strategic imperatives. But can you talk a little bit about how much choice that we have and what the consequences of not doing some of these growth projects for the water over the next decade?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Card. I don't know the details of everything that we've committed to for growth projects for the water side, but if we've committed to it, if we've committed to subdivisions and growth, then we should be completing those projects. On the DC side, everything that we've committed to and is in the plan, those projects are what drive the development charge rate that we set. So if council does decide that some of these growth projects we're not doing, we will have to readjust our development charge as well, and that it's the effect of that.
Thank you. I want to go back to Councillor O'Neill's comment with respect to development charges, and I think your concern is that the government at this point in time is dictating what we will receive in terms of development charges. Correct? They're taking away a certain amount of development charges from us? Is that where you're headed, sir? Or?
Well, my concern is growth isn't paying for growth right now.
Okay, but even if we decide that we want to charge X dollars in terms of development charges, will we receive all of that funding, or where are we at? I guess that's my concern.
So, Mr. Mayor, the 5-year phase-in, so even if we set our rate, the first year we are only allowed to collect 80% of the rate that we've decided on.
Okay, but do we have the ability to, I guess you'd say, respectfully approach the provincial government and ask them to make changes to what they're allotting to municipalities, particularly municipalities like us? I guess you could say yes, we do, but is there any hope? I guess is there any hope that they'll come back to where we were as opposed to heading to where they're going, that I see, where they're cutting what we legally can collect and receive?
I don't have any information on.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Mayor, maybe if I can just jump in. Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, yes, it's something certainly council can do to ask those questions and push back on the province. But at the same point, this legislation's only a year or two old, so I'm not sure that they're going to be jumping to change it right away either. But I think to Councillor O'Neill's point, yeah, council needs to, I think, be prepared when that study comes forward that the amount is definitely going to be higher than it currently is. And then we also need to be prepared based on the new rules around the development charges. You know, if that amount ends up being 20,000, and that's what our number should be, in year one, we can only charge 16, and the city and the taxpayers have to make up that other 4 for every home that is basically developed in year one. So, and then in year two, you know, that charge would be 17,000 and everybody else has to make up the 3,000, because at the end of the day, we have to be putting 20,000 per unit into that development charge fund to have that money there to pay for those projects. So, and I think that's the point Councillor O'Neill's trying to make, that even when council approves a new development charge, there's still going to be significant money that's going to have to come from the tax base for all those projects over and above just the DC money.
Okay, thank you. I think that's our point. So I'm going to ask council for a motion that we draft a letter and send it off to the province soon rather than later with respect to the development charges and the impact they will have on us as we move forward with growth, which we have to have. We can't, as a municipality, we can't stand still. We ought to go ahead and forward, and growth is a big part of us in our city, and we're showing that. So, but growth is also dependent on water and wastewater. We can't grow if we don't have the services. So that's why I'd like you to put that. Councillor Stedall, go ahead.
Just to follow up with that, and I would agree if we could put a motion forward. I guess the other part of it is that the province promised to make us whole. So while they implemented Bill 23 and they said that there was going to be a reduction in these, and this is to try to promote that houses would get built faster and that they could be sold at a lower rate, and that's why they try to reduce the amount of development charges. They also promised that they were going to make municipalities whole. And they haven't come forward with that plan at this point in time. And I think that's the other part of your resolution that you're requesting, is that they finish that and they make us whole so that we don't have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for that difference. Because if growth is supposed to pay for growth, then they should give us the balance.
Exactly what we're trying to say. Yes, thank you. Yes. Okay, so, do we need a motion or will you just do the letter? What do you want? A motion? If we do, you got the motion.
If we could have a motion, and if you could repeat it for me, that would be great. Thank you.
I was afraid I'll ask Councillor Stedall to repeat it. Thank you. Thank you. Please.
So I guess the motion would read something to the effect of that pursuant to the changes in Bill 23, that the city of Quinte West is losing money, that it will have to collect from property taxes, and we request that the province finalize the commitment to make our municipality whole with regards to money that would be lost.
Okay, well, you can
Clean
massage
that
that.
up. Something to that.
Okay, so that's a motion. I need a seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Councillor Quinte seconds the motion. Any further discussion on that motion?
So that our listeners and watchers, if I understand correctly, so we're applying development charges, but the city of Quinte West, or the taxpayers that are already in the city of Quinte West, are also contributing to the development charges. Then the homes and the developments are constructed, be it homes or commercial, and then at a point in time, those homes and commercial properties will be brought into the city and they will start to pay tax revenue. So if I'm understanding it correctly, it appears that the taxpayers who are already here, all of us, because we're not building a new home, I'm not understanding if anybody's building a new home here or not, but if you are, great. We're investing in the new development in a way, and then a year or two down the road when the project is finished and it now starts to pay taxes back to the city. And of course, there will be more properties, so the city will be receiving more revenue. And then those people who are now taxpayers of the city are also going to fund in the future the same idea. If this plan that the province of Ontario has drafted up keeps going continually into the forward into the future, that's what it looks like to me, that we are investing in the growth with how this plan is set up. Whether we like it or not, that's what we're doing.
And development charges are definitely a double-edged sword, because
yeah, correct.
The builder's going to pass it on to the homeowner, and so it's another, whatever you look at, I guess another download. We're trying to keep our head above water.
Correct.
And we're trying to encourage developers to build affordable housing, and yet we increase the development charges, so it makes it more of a challenge. So yes, we're aware of all the negativity, but we also have to encourage the government to do and treat us respectfully and understand the situation that they're putting us in. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. We had a couple other questions.
Mr. Mayor, can we just have a vote on the motion?
Okay, the motion. Okay, all in favor of the motion? Motion carried. Thank you.
Unanimous.
Okay, go ahead then. What's the next question? I guess that's.
I'll hand it off to
Caleb's got money in his hand and he's on next. Is that correct?
Yeah, just closing comments. Yeah, Mayor, as you mentioned, we're in a similar position to most other municipalities. You may have heard about Mayor Olivia Chow making a statement about City of Toronto going broke and having meetings as we speak with the province about how they can address their funding issues and financial issues. Just today, you may have heard City of Peterborough is proposed with a 10% tax increase, about $400 a year to the average residential homeowner. So we're in a similar boat as all municipalities in Ontario. So, and yeah, basically to summarize, what we've heard tonight, we've got debt concerns about where debt levels are going. Reserves are not at our target levels. We have external partnerships and community groups that we know are going to come to the table for 24 for additional funding. We have to consider our asset conditions. Are we, prepared for asset conditions to deteriorate? And so some of this list here, these are the tools that council has in its toolbox when we get to 24 budgeting. The capital levy, condition of assets, what do we expect there? External agency funding, external partnerships, community groups, where we're going to support these and by how much and what funds. Some of these strategic initiatives and special levies, where do we think we're going to set those at? And then, of course, when we get into DCs in the new year, are we going to do these growth projects I guess, in relation to development charges going up, and as well as the portion that's paid for by the taxpayer. So these are some considerations just to summarize what Matt and Riley have kind of brought forward tonight, and open any other questions. I know Matt's taken most of them. So.
Thank you very much. Any further questions on any part of what we've, Councillor Sharp?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Caleb and the team for this good overview. Doesn't look like any good news here,
sorry.
But certainly we have the background of which we're entering the start of this budget. I just wanted to ask, when we meet on December 6th and 7th, and you bring forward the packages over those next 2 days, when you look at the criteria that's been allocated, and I think there's consensus, or I think everyone appreciates the criteria that's been established as you go through the capital projects and bring them back. When you do so, the formatting of this, and I'm just thinking of last budget, would you be going through roads priorities, facilities priorities, using that criteria, and then an amount and what that means in terms of we're at the 2% tax or levy for capital, or 3%? I'm just looking to, I guess, help in terms of looking at all of those.
Yeah.
The volume of the asset management, the volume of the criteria. Everything is more money. We don't have enough money, so it's going to be tough. The criteria is very helpful, but in formatting that, what's it going to look like?
No, through you, Mayor. It's a good question. So what we've done is, based on last year's discussion by council, we've approached it with an assumed 2% capital levy. And so what you'll see is a project listing with the priority scores and overall across all departments with that priority scoring. So if we wanted to go below the 2%, we would know that we could kind of work at that list bottom up. And that priority score would also show on every individual department's capital budget. So you would see in that area priority scoring. Now, if council wanted to address the capital levy more seriously above the 2% target, we could come back in January with additional projects, specifically roads where we know we're underspending, to increase that spend. So we basically just approached it with a 2% target and then priority listing, so we can go up and down from there.
And could I supplement, Mr. Mayor? Yeah. So with the roads, and that always is and will continue to be, and we see it's underfunded by half, basically. That too would, at the next meeting, would have all the roads based on the facility condition or asset management. With all the, I know there's a lot of review of which roads, and it all relates to the facts based on the asset management. So that would be part of that next budget.
That's
or capital.
At this, just be clear, at this point, we're just going to present the road names for 24, I believe.
Okay,
yeah.
Priorities for 24.
Yeah.
And then if I could, just my last one, Mr. Mayor, relates to the Parks and Facilities Recreation Master Plan. Just the status of that, and I see that even in the asset management, we did start looking at the facility component, not just the core. We've gone now into the facilities and outdoor space. But within that, I guess maybe to Director Grimman, we heard of some initiatives, say particularly pickleball. I'll use that for an example. And I know tennis courts are in here, which would be a revamp or potentially new. without that report done, Parks and Facility Master Plan, I'm sure you would still have some indication feeding in, and we're not just going to wait for that report, because I take it we're going to not have it done before this budget, correct?
So there's two parts to that. I'll answer the first part, and then we get to plan. So our asset management plan uses condition-based, and yes, by the middle of next year, we're hoping to have our facilities assessment and appraisals done to have better metrics as to how we rehab and replace. And then I'll pass it on to Dr. Grimman on the Parks and Rec Master Plan, which is more maybe growth-oriented and where we're moving forward.
Okay.
Yes, through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Sharp and further to Director Denowden's comments. Yes, the Parks and Facilities Master Plan we do plan to have completed in 2024. So lots of information to come in that plan. But certainly looking at existing assets that the city owns, but also the long-term planning, growth projections, and certainly inventories of where we're seeing growth, where a lot of the community organizations that are established are seeing increases, decreases, or status quo in terms of registration, and just creating a 15-year plan to allow us to bite things off in chunks for the short, medium, and long term.
Councillor Card, you're on.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, so I guess kind of the headline then, summary, is that 2% over the 10 years is going to, that's kind of a degrading trajectory, I guess, on roads and assets. I think that one of I've been thinking about this a lot the last couple of days, and I think this is a great set up very well to have this kind of earlier strategic discussion, is I think that, going over kind of some of the funding options and looking at really the few, this is a very sobering kind of 10-year vision. I think that if I could put in just my 2 cents, I think that the only easy decision that I see is kind of using a very fine-tooth comb on the future kind of growth projects, maybe the non-water, wastewater, which I feel like we're kind of married to for a lot of other reasons. But I think that it's a little bit scary kind of looking at the fiscal outlook when we haven't been able to kind of square the circle on maintaining the current assets, maintaining the current roads. And so I'm personally, my approach is going to be a very, taking a very narrow view of kind of some of the future investments and builds. And I know that that's kind of maybe a backdoor way of kind of lowering services in a sense, but I remember last year and even at the 4% capital levy, that was like just maintaining, I believe, at 4%. And like realistically, are we ever going to get there? I don't really see a world where we get there. So if you're thinking about it that way, like kind of piling on more projects that are going to, be a struggle to kind of long-term fund and maintain, I think is something that definitely scares me a bit. So I think it's good part of a bigger strategic discussion on, what we're going to do on some of these growth projects and how much longer can we squeeze out of some of the existing infrastructure and facilities and assets. And yeah, just tough discussions, a very sobering presentation. Thanks.
Your Worship?
Sorry. My question is, or I'm asking you to comment on what has happened in your department over the last few years, and maybe you can elaborate. Let's take a cost of a fire truck or the cost of a kilometer of road work, and what just give us an indication. And we're not going to hold you to it or anything, but what has happened over the last few years with any of those aspects in your department?
Through your worship, I guess I could start. So in Public Works, you've heard me say over the last year or so that the price of a half-ton truck, so when we started 5 years ago, there were maybe 23 $24,000. Now they're up to close to $60,000 just for a basic half-ton truck. A tandem truck used to be, $185,000, $200,000. They're now close to $450,000, closer to $500,000. And the time frame went from 6 months to 8 months for delivery. Now almost 2 years worth of delivery time frames. Asphalt 4 or 5 years ago was roughly $85 a ton placed on the roadway. Now it's roughly $150, $160 per ton. So some of those costs have escalated substantially. And then together it's, cost of living, everything else, but our budgets haven't increased that way as well. So we've had to pare back the number of kilometers of roadways we've had to resurface, or the number of vehicles we've had to replace because the money just hasn't been there. We had to reprioritize.
Thank you very much, and that's my exact point. We're using the word here saying that we're underfunding our road work by half, but I think really in reality, we're funding our road work completely, but we're only able to do what we can do because of the increased costs. Thank you. I'm going to ask Chief Whalen to just, I'll come back, Councillor Stedall, don't worry, I'll come back to you. Chief Whalen, just tell us what's happened to, your department, and you can use whatever example. I know you've got a number of them.
Well, I'll just kind of piggyback on Director Angelo, but the vehicles are the biggest thing, and I'll be coming to the budget, and I've sat down with Director Denowden and Matt Hodging, and I need another $100,000 to buy a fire truck this year. That we thought last year $500,000 was going to be enough, and now it's not. It's $600,000, and that's just a typical example. And if we have to order it, we're 3 to 4 years now, where we were 2 years last year. So that's an issue. And as you know, too, one of the engines that's been discontinued, there's another one. I have a hard time grasping this, but just this motor is an extra $100,000 over previous years, just for the engine and the fire
truck. They don't have any option. They're telling us they have a few, not many. They're
No,
scarce.
that's right.
So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but there's obviously something that's impacting the length of time it takes to get what you need, and we know that you need it. It's not a matter of just ordering it, sitting back and waiting for it to arrive, because it puts us in a serious situation.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Stedall, go ahead, please.
Thank you. We're just a few items. I guess for the next meeting, I mean, I know we're talking about a 2% capital levy, but we also have the operations levy, which we haven't touched on. And I know that you talked about some of the different user groups that are going to be coming to us, but we still have to pull all of that together. So our final percentage increase may not be 2%. I guess just to make that clear, this is just capital we're talking about here. But I'm just wondering, will we also be seeing, you said that we were only getting the detail for 2024 for the capital, but I'm wondering if we will be able to see the long range, more detail on some of the capital work that is going to be in the future. I'm just thinking there's some large ticket items that I know, not just in the water plants, but also with major construction with roadways and facilities and just our equipment in general. And if we'll see a little bit more detail on some of those things that as we did last year that are projected over the next 10 years.
Mayor, that's correct. The 2% capital levy, that would just be one component. There would of course be the operating levy as well, and the external groups. In terms of the detail for future years, we do know that a lot of these growth projects that we're discussing tonight, we do want to put those on the agenda with the DC study update in the new year, just because they have a direct effect on the rates, and then it'll also be discussed on how that affects the taxpayer. So we don't want to distract the budget discussions with future capital growth projects. So that's one reason we're taking this approach. We can have discussions about some of those projects in future years, but we felt at this point it was best to kind of let those discussions happen during the DC budget meetings, and then again when the wastewater rate discussions come up after the DC budget or DC discussions.
Okay, just to clarify though, I'm not just talking about growth-related projects, I'm talking about maintenance, capital items, so some of our facilities and even the marina project, the break wall, and things like that, they're not growth-related. They're current assets that we have that may need upgrades, and I'm just wondering, like, I understand how you are tying in the growth-related projects into the DC study, but there are other long-term capital projects that are not related to DCs. I'm just wondering if we're gonna see that list.
Thank you, you're right, yes, absolutely. Any further comment? No. Any other questions, folks? Councillor McEwen and
Just a couple
Councillor
more.
Cruz. Oh,
I just have a couple more on that, if I, just two
Go
more
ahead.
things I'd be looking for.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
just, and we know there is some good news. So the good news hopefully is that with all of this growth in the money we've invested at the city so far, there's gonna be assessment growth. So that number will be coming forward, maybe that's gonna help mitigate something. But the other question is about user fees, such as bag tags. Will there be a user fee bylaw that's being brought forward at the next meeting so that we can show what some of our fees are and maybe take a look at some of those numbers to see if we can help alleviate the tax base, tax increase?
Through your worship, right now we have the user fee approved for 23-24. It was not planned to bring it to the budget discussions here in December, but of course we're open to comments and considerations by council if we want to reopen that bylaw right now.
Well, when you come back with information, you can put that in as information, and we'll have a chance to look at it. Thank you. Councillor Quinte and then Councillor McEwen.
Just to talk on the capital levy, and I've always thought that instead of the capital levy, we should also be having specifically for road levy, not to go towards debt. We apply a road levy, whatever we decide on, we collect it for that year, and that money goes directly into the roads and not to any debt payments. And then that way, every year, we're not using that money for anything but roads. And we could pick any number, 1%, 2%, 5%, whatever it is, and then that money goes directly to roads. Is there a way that you can bring some sort of a report at the December 6th or 7th meeting, whichever one is going to work, where you can show us if we just did 2% for roads and we still maintain the 2% capital levy, and then that capital levy can go for everything else that's capital, debt payments, buildings, structures that are not roads, and then we have specifically just a road levy going forward into the future, and you can just give us a couple of examples of what 2% might look like and what 5% might look like, so we can all have a look at it. Because like right after we did not just the 2023 budget, but after we did the 22 budget, what were we seeing in March and April and early summer, where people asking like, fix my pothole here and fix my pothole there, and my road is terrible, or my road hasn't been done for decades. And there are roads that haven't been done for more than 50 years. There's a few of them out there. But if we don't do something now, that number is only going to be bigger tomorrow, like really a lot bigger. So that's why I'm making this suggestion, so that we can see what that would look like. And then you would have even the 2% capital levy could be better utilized for the other projects that are not roads. And I believe our citizens, a grand majority of our citizens, would get behind a road levy and see that we are dealing with the road issues, making the best we can with what we have to work with, and they would actually start seeing good things happen from that and be very happy. We all use roads. Even if we don't have a car, we use a road because The trucks have to come to the stores. The bus needs the roads. Your neighbors need the roads. If your neighbors are driving you here and there or everywhere, you have to get around somehow. Even if you're using an ambulance to get to the hospital, you need to get on the road to go there. So everybody uses them, and it seems to be the #1 complaint throughout the year, these roads. And I just think that if we concentrated something like that, we would get a lot of support for something like that. So is that possible for the next meeting?
Well, I go back to whatever you've said, and we do that every year. We do that every year when we look at the budget. We know exactly how much money is going to go to public works. And Councillor, or Director Angelo can tell you specifically where he's going with money. There's no questions. There's no issue. That's what we can do, and that's where the money goes. So
I'm suggesting to have
I know
it.
what you're suggesting, but I'm telling you that that's what we've done for the last, historical years.
But our taxes that we're collecting and our capital levy that we're collecting, we're also using that money to pay off debts. And I don't want to use any money to pay off debts. I don't want to collect or have to go out and get money, because in the end, you have to pay interest on that. And today the interest rate is higher this year than it was last year. And last year it was higher than it was the year before. I mean, I do agree, 4 and 5 years ago, it was great to borrow money. And we did. And we made arrangements to borrow money, and we can see it in our debt load that we have right now. So I'm just suggesting that we have something to look at where we don't use the road levy. If we decide to go that route, we don't use it to borrow any money. It's just for that next year's or that particular year's projects. That's what I'm suggesting.
Anything else? Councillor McHugh, you're on.
Thank you. Just an idea. To summarize what I'm hearing is we need more money. We got to figure out where it comes from. So I'm going to throw out an idea. We had Mr. Chris King here, Quinte Economic Development, last council meeting, and we jokingly asked him, or I did, if he had another Amazon or something up his sleeve, and the reply basically was, we don't have 50 or 100 acres available as an industrial park. We're building houses, we're putting people in the houses. Industries we have, they're leaving, new people are coming. Thank God they are coming and filling the same buildings. But industrial-wise, for a tax base, we really are not growing as a city. Maybe it's time we looked at something like that along the 401 corridor somewhere, Hamilton Road or Telephone Road, Elmer Highway 2, something where we could reach out to Chris King and say, look, we have an industrial park. We have 50 or 100 acres. If somebody wants to buy it, put something big in, maybe it's time to look that way to generate more funds. I'm under the impression that industrial taxes would go a long way to paying our bills and keeping the household taxes in line.
Thank you.
To your worship, we do have an industrial land study. Maybe Dr. Griffin, you want to speak to that?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yes, we are currently undertaking an industrial lands review and strategy. We have a working group established through the Economic Development, Special Events and Tourism Advisory Committee that will be bringing back some recommendations to council within the next, I would say, 6 months. That group has made some advancements. We've got a consultant engaged as part of that process, and we will certainly be looking to bring forward information about the current supply of industrial lands and then any potential needs for future lands, as well as what's available in terms of private land holdings for industrial use.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Then I'm at public input. Public input. Have we got anybody for public input? Okay, then resolutions. I've got committee reports and resolution that moving to second. Council staff report 23-77 FIN on the 2024 budget outlook as information, and the council approved the capital budget ranking tool for the 24 capital budget, and staff report 23062 FIN from Riley Walters, Asset Management Coordinator, regarding Asset Management Plan update. So that's what I've got in front of me. Councillor McHugh has moved it, Councillor Allier seconded. Comments or questions? All in favor? Carried, thank you. And the next resolution is that council staff, a report 23062 FIN, Asset Management Plan Update as information related to the 24 budget. And further, that staff bring back a final version of the asset management plans required for all municipal assets in accordance with 0 Reg 588-17 before the July 2024 deadline. Asset management plan, facilities, new asset management plan, fleet, new asset management plan, outdoor parks and recreation, new asset management plan, transportation, asset management plan, water and wastewater. Okay, do I need a mover and a seconder? Councillor Sharp moves, Councillor Boyd second. Comments or questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
After we pass this tonight, can staff post this on our city website and on our Facebook page and send out a notice to the press to get the word out?
Yes, I'm sure.
Through your worship, on the plans, we'll advise that we leave the existing plans as is until the new plans are updated by the middle of 24.
Okay. Okay.
We're not going to post it down.
We have an existing asset management plan that is posted on our website.
Okay.
I tried to find it last night and it just kept taking me back to like 2019. Is that the one that is in effect?
Yeah, we have one for 2022. We'll look into the website.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, all in favor of this motion? Carried, thank you. And then the resolution that staff report 23-075 FN regarding the 24-20 to 2023 city long-term capital plan be received by council as information. Councillor McHugh, Councillor Anita Seconder, Councillor Card, any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried, thank you. And the resolution that staff report 23-067 FIN regarding the 24 to 33 municipal enterprises water and wastewater long-term financial plan be received by council as information. Councillor Boyce moves, seconded by Councillor Sharp. Questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you very much. And I think we're at the end, isn't that correct?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just want to ask one question or make one comment, I guess, under new business. We're just in the process of putting the agendas together or the structure for the December 6th and 7th budget meetings. And I just wanted to, I guess, get a general consensus from council. Generally, we have presentations and then public input and then reports. I just wanted to make sure or see if council had any objection if we actually move public input to the beginning of the meetings for those 2 days. Our concern is if we don't do that and we have public that want to come and make comments, it's pretty hard to say, well, it might be at 1 o'clock or it might be at 3 o'clock, whereas if we move that to the beginning of the agenda, we could tell them when it would be starting around 9, and they would have an opportunity both days to speak, and it's just easier and more consistent that way. As long as nobody's got any major objection, then we'll structure those meetings that way.
So I'm asking, anybody object? I guess that's my question. All right,
Okay. That's good.
All in favor? I guess that's, so you're fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else under, okay, 2 for confirmation, 2 for adjournment. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, staff, for putting this all together, and thank you very much for all the work that you've done. And listen, I also want to pay my respect to our first responders, all of them in particular, but I want to also recognize our fire department, the volunteers who've been out over the last, on a regular basis and dealing with very difficult demands. But thank you very much, Chief, and make sure our volunteers know we really appreciate the work they do. And yes, I wished I could say, didn't have to say that, but thank you.